Hey, boys and girls. This week we start book 3 of the Odyssey, our last part of our journey with Odysseus as he's trying to make his way home to Ithaca. Now, he just went down to the land of the dead to talk to Tiresias. He knows what he has to do. And now begins book 3, Sirens and Sea Monsters. Chapter 1, The Land of the Living. Thousands of wailing ghosts moved toward Odysseus. Their anguished cries echoed through the fog. Odysseus and his men began to run. They ran for their lives, fleeing from the dead. "Land ahead!" one of Odysseus's men called. Odysseus woke from his nightmare. He had fallen asleep on the deck of his ship. He had been dreaming of his visit to the spirit world ruled by Hades and Persephone. Now in the distance he could see the island of Circe the enchantress. "I will tell Circe all that I saw and heard in the land of the dead," he thought. "Then surely she will help us find our way home to Ithaca." For 12 long years Odysseus had yearned to return to the Greek island of Ithaca and be reunited with his beloved wife and son. During that time he and his men had fought in the Trojan War. They had battled the Cyclops, a one-eyed monster. They had escaped cannibal giants, losing all but one of their ships. Odysseus had charmed the wily enchantress Circe, and he and his men had now survived a journey to the land of the dead, a journey from which no mortal had ever returned alive. As they sailed now towards Circe's sunlit island, the Greeks cheered. The island was covered with beautiful green forest and ringed by rocky shores. Birds sang in the trees as the Greeks anchored their ship. But as the sun went down and they dragged themselves ashore, a great weariness overtook them. Each man collapsed in the sand, too exhausted to speak. Lying on the cool beach, Odysseus stared up at the moon and stars. He pushed away all his memories of the land of the dead. He felt the soft breezes and listened to the waves lap the shore. The world of the living seemed an extraordinary place indeed. As rosy-fingered dawn spread over the island, Odysseus opened his eyes. He saw Circe emerge from her palace. She was dressed in a beautiful gown of rainbow colors. Her handmaidens trailed behind her in the fresh morning air, carrying trays of meat, bread, and wine. Odysseus jumped to his feet and awakened his men. Then he hurried to greet the goddess. Though the enchantress had once tried to harm him and his men, she was now their friend and protector. "Greetings," Odysseus called. "Welcome, my brave friend," said Circe, smiling. "You have done what no other mortals have ever done. You have traveled to the land of the dead and returned. When you die, others will say that you have died twice." "Yes, we are grateful to the gods for our safe journey back to your island," Odysseus said. "We pray that you will now help us find our way home to Ithaca." "Indeed I will," said Circe. "But today you must rest, for you have a long, hard voyage ahead of you. Feast and drink and celebrate your return. Then tomorrow, when the dawn breaks, you shall set sail for Ithaca." The men cheered. They were famished and thirsty and delighted to spend the day in the company of Circe and her lovely handmaidens. All morning and all afternoon, Odysseus and his men feasted and drank wine. When the sun finally set and darkness covered the island, the men lay down in the hollow of their ship and fell fast asleep. Odysseus himself did not rest. Circe took him by the hand and led him into the moonlit forest. Together they sat in the shadows beneath a towering oak. "Tell me of your journey, Odysseus," Circe said. "What did you see in the land of the dead? What did you learn there?" Odysseus told Circe about his journey to the gray kingdom of Hades and Persephone, rulers of the dead. He told her about the spirits who had come forth, begging for blood so they might be restored to life. "Among them was my mother," he said sorrowfully. "She died of grief, waiting for me to come home to Ithaca. She told me that my father and my wife and son still ache for my return. I spoke also with my friend Achilles, who was slain in the Trojan War. I spoke with the high king Agamemnon. I saw Heracles, Sisyphus, and Tantalus. Finally, I spoke with the blind prophet Tiresias. And what did the prophet tell you? Asked Circe. He gave me wise counsel and warnings, said Odysseus. This is what he said. On your way home, you will pass the island of the sun god. On this island, there are many beautiful sheep and cattle. Do not let your men touch even one of these creatures. They are much adored by the sun. Anyone who tries to slay them will meet his doom. You alone might escape. But if you do, you will be a broken man. You will find great trouble in your house. Circe sighed. Yes, those are wise words, she said. But before you reach the island of the sun god, you must brave other dangers. Listen to me carefully, Odysseus, for I am about to speak of terrible things. But do exactly as I say, and you and your men will find your way home. What terrible things do you think she might speak of? Let's find out. Circe's warning. Odysseus, can you bear to hear what I have to say? Circe asked him. Are you prepared to know the horrors that await you on your journey? Odysseus nodded. What could be more horrible than the Cyclops, or the cannibal giants, or even the spell of Circe herself, when she had once cast it upon his men, turning them into swine? Circe began. Soon after you leave my island, you will come upon the island of the Sirens. The Sirens are beautiful women. From a field of flowers, they sing to all sailors who pass their shores. Odysseus almost laughed. What threat could these women possibly be to me and my men? He asked. Any sailor who hears the songs of the Sirens will forget his homeland, his wife, and his children, said Circe. The Sirens' lovely singing will lure him to a watery death. Odysseus smiled and shook his head. He could not believe a simple song could have such power. Heed my warning, Odysseus, said Circe. The Sirens' shores are littered with the bones of sailors driven mad by their song. You must make your crew plug their ears with beeswax so none will be able to hear, else you all will perish. I wonder if Odysseus will show that arrogance again, or if he'll take her advice. I will order them to do so, Odysseus agreed, but I myself will listen. I do not believe my will to return home can be broken by a song. Then you alone may hear the Sirens, said Circe, but first your men must tie your hands and your feet to the mast of the ship, or you will surely hurl yourself into the sea. Tell your men that even if you plead with them to loosen your bonds, they must not. Will you swear to do that? Odysseus nodded. Once you've sailed past the Sirens, you will see 2 sea paths, said Circe. One path will lead you between the wandering rocks. The wandering rocks are gigantic boulders that pound against one another with terrific fury. No living thing, not even a dove on her way to Zeus, can pass between them without being crushed. The waves that foam about the wandering rocks are filled with the wreckage of ships and the bodies of sailors. Only Jason and his Argonauts have survived them, but that was because the goddess Hera loved Jason and protected him. I fear we cannot depend upon protection from the gods, said Odysseus. Tell me, Circe, what is the other path? The other path leads between 2 sea cliffs, said Circe. One cliff is quite low. There, under a giant fig tree, dwells the deadly whirlpool monster Charybdis. Any ship that sails near Charybdis is sucked into the black bottom of the sea. Even Poseidon himself cannot save mortal sailors from the monster whirlpool. This is not sounding good, is it? And what of the other cliff? Asked Odysseus. What danger lies on its shore? High on the side of the second cliff is a dark cave, said Circe. In the cave dwells the monster Scylla. She yelps like a small hound, but in truth, she is a terrible beast. Even the gods and goddesses cannot look upon her without being sickened. Why is she so terrible? Asked Odysseus. Scylla is a monster with 6 huge, hideous heads, said Circe. Her 6 mouths are filled with razor-sharp teeth. In an instant, the monster can devour 6 men. All day, Scylla sits inside her cave, gazing greedily over the sea with her 12 eyes. Whenever a ship sails by, she strikes with all her heads and snatches 6 sailors from the deck. In no time, she rips her poor victims to pieces. Odysseus stared at the enchantress. Then the choice you give me is impossible, he said. Either we're drowned by the whirlpool monster or we die in the jaws of the 6-headed beast. The choice is this, Circe said. If you sail close to the monster whirlpool, you will all die. But if you sail close to Scylla, only 6 will be lost. Odysseus closed his eyes. He had already seen dozens of his men die hideous deaths. Some had been eaten by the monstrous Cyclops. Others had been speared alive by cannibal giants. How could he bear to see more slaughtered? I counsel you to take the course that leads past the monster Scylla, said Circe. Do not try to fight her. You will lose 6 men, but if you sail swiftly enough past the monster, you will lose only 6. The rest will have a chance to escape. Odysseus was silent for a moment. He could hardly bear to follow Circe's counsel. How can I knowingly sacrifice my men to such a hideous death, he asked. How can I choose which 6 will die? It is not in your power to choose who shall die, said Circe. The monster will make the choice for you. Perhaps she will even choose you. Odysseus shook his head. No, I will kill her before she touches any of us, he said. Do not be so proud, Odysseus, Circe said. You are only a mortal. No mortal, not even you, can defeat Scylla. While you waste time attacking her with your sword, she will devour another 6 men. You must row your ship at full speed and shout a prayer to Scylla's mother asking for help. Only she can stop her savage daughter from devouring more men. I noticed that Circe said, do not be so proud, Odysseus. You're only a mortal. She's telling him, you're not a god. You're not going to live forever. Stop acting like you are. And this, I think, is where we get to the theme of the book. I'll tell you about that saying tomorrow. Before Odysseus could protest further, Circe went on. If you escape from the monster, it will be time to heed the warnings of Tiresias, Circe said. For soon you will come to the island of Helios, the sun god. There you will see 7 herds of cattle and 7 flocks of sheep. There are 50 beasts in each herd. They are tended by 2 fair nymphs, daughters of Helios. The sheep and cattle never give birth. They never die. But if any of your men so much as touches them, all your crew will perish. You yourself might escape, but you will have a sad and terrible time when you return home to your island. Your wife and son will suffer also. Odysseus stood up. The thought that his family might be in danger kindled his desire to start for home at once. Thank you for your help, he said to Circe. I promise to heed your warnings. Good, she said. I've told you all that you need to know. Your path will be dangerous indeed, but if you do as I say, you will find your way home. Go now, for the dawn is almost upon us. Odysseus looked around at the forest. A misty golden pink light filtered through the trees. A breeze made the leaves quiver and dance. Birds began to sing. When Odysseus turned back to the enchantress, she was gone. Circe, he called. She did not answer. She had slipped away into the dawn's rosy light. All right, guys, quick assignment for you. Go to the next slide, and I want you to tell me, if you were Odysseus, what would you do? Would you go for Charybdis, the whirlpool monster? Take your risk there? Would you go past Scylla, the 6-headed giant? Would you try to fight Scylla? Tell me why. I'll see you back here tomorrow when Odysseus will start back on his journey.